To approach the existence of vampires not as a gothic fantasy, but as a rigorous biological and evolutionary possibility, we must first strip away the velvet capes and the supernatural mysticism to reveal a creature forged by the brutal efficiency of natural selection. If a subspecies of Homo sapiens, let's call them Homo sapiens nosferatu, truly existed, their physiology would represent one of the most extreme examples of specialized evolution in the mammalian kingdom. The core of this transformation would be an obligatory hematophagic diet. In the natural world, blood is a notoriously difficult food source. It is 80% water, mineral-rich but dangerously deficient in vitamins like B, and loaded with iron that would be toxic in high doses to a standard human metabolism. For a vampire to survive, their digestive system would need to be radically overhauled. We're talking about a hypertrophied renal system to process massive fluid intake and a unique gut microbiome, perhaps involving symbiotic bacteria similar to those found in Desmodus rotundus, the common vampire bat, which specialize in synthesizing missing nutrients and detoxifying heme. This isn't magic, it's a high-stakes metabolic gamble. The thirst wouldn't be a spiritual craving, but a relentless physiological drive caused by a lack of endogenous glucose production, forcing the creature to hijack the energy-rich hemoglobin of others just to maintain cellular function. Beyond the gut, the most striking adaptation would be photosensitivity and the resulting circadian inversion. The legend of vampires burning in sunlight isn't necessarily a magical curse, but could be explained as an extreme form of porphyria cutanea tarda, combined with a complete lack of melanin protection. In this scientific model, the vampire's skin would be hyper-efficient at absorbing UV radiation to the point of catastrophic thermal runaway. At the molecular level, their cells might lack the DNA repair enzymes, like photolyase, that protect us from solar damage, causing immediate, cascading apoptosis when exposed to direct sunlight. This would force a total nocturnal existence, which in turn drives the evolution of the sensory organs. To hunt in the pitch black of a pre-industrial world, Homo sapiens nosferatu would likely have developed a tapetum lucidum, a reflective layer behind the retina, granting them superior low-light vision at the cost of the glowing eye effect seen in nocturnal predators. Furthermore, their hearing would likely shift toward the ultrasonic, allowing them to track the rhythmic pulse of a victim's carotid artery from across a crowded square. We are describing a predator designed to find a needle of life in a haystack of darkness. But the most fascinating and terrifying scientific aspect would be the vampiric virus, or pathogenic symbiosis. In nature, parasites often alter the behavior of their hosts. Consider Toxoplasma gondii or the Ophiocordyceps fungus. If vampirism were a blood-borne pathogen, it would act as a genetic rewriter. Upon infection, the virus would infiltrate the host's stem cells, triggering a rapid, agonizing metamorphosis. The lengthening of the canines wouldn't be a sudden growth of new bone, but a remodeling of the existing maxillary structure, controlled by highly specific homeobox genes that are usually dormant after embryonic development. This pathogen would also need to tackle the problem of, quote, immortality. In biological terms, what we call vampiric immortality is actually negligible senescence. The virus would have to aggressively repair telomeres, the protective caps on our chromosomes that shorten as we age. By constantly refreshing the telomerase enzyme, the vampire's cells could theoretically divide indefinitely, avoiding the Hayflick limit that dictates the death of every other human cell. They wouldn't be undead in a mystical sense. They would be hyper-living, their biology overclocked by a viral architect that refuses to let the body decay, so long as the high caloric fuel of fresh blood continues to flow. Moving from the fundamental metabolism to the mechanics of the kill, we must examine the specialized predatory toolkit that would allow a humanoid organism to subdue prey and extract blood with surgical precision. If we analyze the physics of the vampiric strike, we encounter a requirement for extreme burst speed and muscular density. In the animal kingdom, fast-twitch muscle fibers provide explosive power but fatigue rapidly. However, a vampiric physiology would likely utilize a hybrid myosin variant, allowing for incredible anaerobic output without the immediate buildup of lactic acid. This would be facilitated by a highly efficient circulatory system that acts more like a high-pressure hydraulic press than a standard human heart. Their skeletal structure would need to be reinforced with carbon-calcium composites to withstand the sheer torque generated by these muscles, preventing their own bones from shattering during a high-speed pursuit. This isn't just super strength. It is a biological specialization for ambush predation, where the gap between the shadows and the victim's throat is closed in a fraction of a second, faster than the human eye can process at 60 frames per second. The act of feeding itself requires a sophisticated hematological interface. The iconic fangs would not be simple piercing tools. They would be sophisticated delivery systems for a complex cocktail of vampiric venom. This biochemical slurry would contain powerful anticoagulants, like draculin, found in bat saliva, to prevent the host's blood from clotting during the transfer. More importantly, it would include a localized anesthetic to numb the area, and, perhaps most intriguingly, a psychotropic component. By flooding the victim's bloodstream with a mix of endorphins and oxytocin, the vampire could induce a state of chemical compliance, or euphoria, minimizing the struggle and ensuring the prey doesn't go into a high cortisol fight-or-flight response, which would taint the blood with stress hormones. Scientifically, this would turn the bite from an assault into a parasitic sedation. The vampire's tongue and throat would be lined with specialized papillae and a powerful muscular pump capable of drawing several liters of fluid in under a minute, a featuring that would require the vampire's own skin and internal organs to be highly elastic, similar to the distensible bodies of leeches or certain deep-sea fish. Now we must address the neurology of the hunger. For a human-derived mind to handle the psychological transition to an obligatory predator, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and empathy, would likely be suppressed or rewired by the viral pathogen during the initial transformation. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala and the hypothalamus, would become the dominant hubs, creating a permanent state of hypervigilance. This would explain the legendary vampiric coldness. It is not a lack of emotion, but a total prioritization of sensory input over social bonding. Their neural pathways would be optimized for pattern recognition, tracking the scent of specific blood types or the subtle infrared heat signatures of mammalian life. This leads to the concept of sensory overload. If a vampire's senses are 10 times more acute than a human's, then a standard environment, bright lights, loud music, strong odors like garlic, would be physically painful. The aversion to garlic, for instance, could be a severe allergic hypersensitivity to allicin, a compound that, while harmless to us, might act as a potent neurotoxin or respiratory irritant to a creature with such highly tuned olfactory receptors. Even the aversion to crosses could be interpreted scientifically as geometrical dysphoria, or a visual seizure trigger, where certain high-contrast symmetrical shapes cause a cascade of neural misfiring in an apex predator's specialized brain. To understand how such a creature could coexist with humanity without causing an immediate ecological collapse, we must look at the mathematics of apex parasitism. If Homo sapiens nosferatu were a simple predator, they would have hunted their food, source to extinction, millennia ago. Instead, their survival depends on a subtle integration model, much like a virus that learns not to kill its host too quickly. Scientifically, this would require a low-density population equilibrium. In any given ecosystem, there is a carrying capacity for top-tier predators. For vampires, this would mean a strict ratio, perhaps one vampire for every 50,000 humans, to ensure that the culling remains statistically indistinguishable from natural mortality rates or disappearances. Their legendary hidden societies are actually a biological necessity to avoid triggering a mass immune response from the human population. If humanity is the body, then the vampire is a symbiotic cancer that has learned to hide from the immune system. They would likely possess an extraordinary immunological resilience, with a lymphatic system capable of filtering out every human pathogen, from the Black Death to modern influenza, meaning the vampire acts as a biological heat sink, absorbing diseases from their prey but never falling ill themselves, thanks to a hyperactive interferon response that destroys viral invaders on contact. This brings us to the most complex part of the vampiric puzzle: genetic sequestration and the phenotype of fear. If vampirism is passed via a viral vector, why isn't the whole world infected? The answer lies in the viral load and genetic compatibility. The vampiric pathogen likely has a low infectivity rate, requiring a massive direct exchange of blood and a specific genetic predisposition in the victim to take hold. Most victims simply die of exsanguination or systemic shock. Only a fraction of a percent possess the leukocyte antigens necessary to survive the transformation. This creates a natural bottleneck, preventing a vampire apocalypse and ensuring the predator remains a rare, elite mutation. Furthermore, the pale complexion isn't just a lack of sun, it's a sign of peripheral vasoconstriction. To keep their core temperature stable and minimize heat loss during their nocturnal hunts, vampires would pull blood away from the skin's surface and toward the vital organs and muscles. This would make them appear like marble, practically invisible to infrared sensors, effectively giving them a thermal cloak against other predators or modern technology. But the most haunting scientific possibility is the neural hook, or interspecies hypnosis. We've touched on pheromones, but what if the vampire can manipulate the low-frequency oscillations of the human brain? Using infrasound, sound waves below the threshold of human hearing, a vampire could induce feelings of dread, paralysis, or even a trance-like state in their prey. Many large predators like tigers use infrasound to freeze their victims. A vampire's vocal cords, modified by the transformation, could emit these subsonic frequencies, vibrating the fluid in the human inner ear and triggering a vestibular disruption. To the victim, it feels like the world is slowing down or that they are being charmed, but in reality, their brain is being physically hacked by acoustic pressure. This is neurobiological warfare. The vampire doesn't need to be magic to control you. They just need to understand the resonance of your skull and the fragility of your amygdala. They are the ultimate anthropomorphic hackers, exploiting every glitch in the human evolutionary design, from our fear of the dark to our susceptibility to chemical pleasure, to turn us from the masters of the planet into a specialized resource. As we move into the modern era, the biological hegemony of the vampire faces its greatest existential threat: the great transparency of the technological age. For millennia, Homo sapiens Nosferatu relied on the shadow gap, the inability of human senses and primitive records to track a predator that operates in the blind spots of history. But in an age of ubiquitous high-resolution thermal imaging, satellite surveillance, and DNA sequencing, the vampire's cloaking biology is being stripped away. From a scientific standpoint, the vampire is now an obsolete apex, a creature whose evolutionary niche is being closed by the rapid advancement of human artificial intelligence and global sensing. To survive, the vampiric species would have to undergo a technological metamorphosis. We are no longer talking about hiding in castles. We are talking about molecular mimicry. A modern vampire would need to be a master of biohacking, using synthetic blood substitutes or heme analogs to satisfy their metabolic requirements without leaving a trail of bodies. The hunger is no longer just a biological drive. It is a data signature that must be scrubbed from the digital world. This leads to the concept of the corporate parasite, where the vampire moves from the physical shadows into the financial and digital shadows, controlling the flow of resources to ensure their continued anonymity in a world that has become too bright for their ancient eyes. However, the most pressing scientific concern for the vampiric species is genetic drift and the inbreeding depression of a small, isolated population. Because they are so rare and their reproduction, infection, is so inefficient, their gene pool is dangerously shallow. Over centuries, the vampiric pathogen would begin to mutate, leading to pathological instability. We might see the emergence of reaper strains, variants of the virus that burn through the host too quickly, leading to rapid cellular necrosis instead of immortality. This is the genetic heat death of the species. To counter this, a vampire would have to become a genetic thief, constantly integrating fresh human sequences into their own genome to patch the errors caused by centuries of viral replication. They are living fossils that must constantly steal from the present to prevent their own biological collapse. This creates a terrifying evolutionary feedback loop. The more they interfere with human genetics to save themselves, the more they risk creating a super pathogen that could wipe out their only food source. They are locked in a Red Queen's race, running as fast as they can just to stay in the same place, biologically speaking. The final scientific frontier for the vampire is the post-human transition. If a vampire can survive the next century, they might cease to be biological entities at all. We must consider the silicon vampire, a consciousness that has abandoned the fragile, blood-dependent meat suit for a digital existence, feeding on data and processing power instead of hemoglobin. But if they remain biological, They represent the final anthropic limit. They are a mirror held up to our own species, showing us what we could become if we prioritized individual longevity over collective survival. Scientifically, the vampire is a biological singularity, a point where the laws of human evolution break down and something new and infinitely more predatory emerges. Their existence is a reminder that the food chain is not a static ladder, but a fluid and terrifyingly dynamic system. We are the masters of this planet, only because no greater predator has yet evolved to challenge us in the light. But in the cold, calculated reality of a universe governed by entropy and competition, the vampire is not a myth. They are a statistical certainty, an inevitable outcome of a universe that always finds a way to turn life into a resource for something even more efficient at surviving. As we push beyond the limits of current biology and into the realm of cosmic parasitism, we must address the ultimate fate of a species that has conquered death but remains a slave to the hunt. If we look at the universe through the lens of the Great Filter Theory, the idea that there are hurdles in the development of life that most civilizations fail to pass, the existence of a vampiric subspecies might actually be a biological filter for humanity itself. From an evolutionary standpoint, a predator that mimics its prey perfectly is the ultimate challenge to a species' survival. But what happens when that predator outlives the very world that birthed it? Scientifically, if a vampire's negligible senescence allows them to live for millennia, they are forced to confront information entropy. A brain, even a hyper-efficient vampiric one, has a finite storage capacity for memories. Over centuries, a vampire would experience neural overwrite, where the personality begins to fragment as new data replaces the old. To survive this, they would need to develop a distributed consciousness, perhaps utilizing the very viral pathogen that created them as a biological cloud storage system, encoding their memories into the DNA of the dormant vampire virus within their own cells. They would become walking archives, their very blood containing the encoded history of 1,000 years, making them the only truly eternal observers of the human experiment. This leads us to the subatomic metabolism hypothesis. If blood is merely the initial fuel source, an ancient and sufficiently evolved vampire might eventually bypass the need for biological matter entirely. In the extreme cold and darkness of deep space, or the high-energy environments near a singularity, a post-biological vampire could evolve to feed on kinetic energy or quantum fluctuations. We are talking about vacuum-based organisms that drain the potential energy from the vacuum itself, effectively becoming entropy vampires that accelerate the cooling of the universe to sustain their own immortality. In this terrifying cosmic scale, the vampire is no longer a man in a cape. It is a fundamental force of nature, a localized sink that draws order out of chaos, leaving a trail of high-entropy dead space in its wake. This is the logical conclusion of the predatory path. If you survive long enough, you eventually run out of prey on your own planet and must look to the stars to satisfy a hunger that has become metaphysical. But let us bring it back to the final part of our scientific narrative, the moral duality of physics. If science can explain the vampire, it also provides the tools to destroy it. The same genetic engineering that could grant them immortality provides us with targeted pathogens that could turn their own hyperactive immune systems against them. We are entering an era of interspecies arms race. If vampires exist, they are currently in a desperate race to geneticize their existence before human AI maps every anomalous strand of DNA in the global population. This is the endgame of the Nosferatu. They are either the next stage of human evolution, a high-energy, high-efficiency predator that will eventually leave the Earth behind, or they are an evolutionary dead end, a beautiful but lethal mistake that the universe is currently in the process of correcting. Their story is the story of the second law of thermodynamics written in blood. You can steal energy, you can delay decay, and you can hide in the shadows, but eventually the lights turn on, the sun rises, and the universe demands its energy back. The vampire is the ultimate debt, and in the cold mathematics of reality, every debt must eventually be paid in full.